There are moments in human history when everything changes, when the universe reveals itself in ways that shatter our understanding of reality. This is the story of such a moment, and the brave souls who faced the impossible. The stars had always seemed distant and silent, but on a cold October morning, they whispered back. Captain Daniel Reeves stood in the observation deck of the International Space Station, watching something that shouldn't exist. His weathered hands gripped the railing as his mind struggled to process what the telescopes had captured. Behind him, Dr. Patricia Hammond tapped frantically at her console, her auburn hair falling loose from its clip as she verified the readings for the 7th time. "It's real." "Daniel," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The gravitational distortions, the energy signatures, everything confirms it. That thing out there is impossibly massive and heading toward the inner solar system." The object appeared on their screens like a dark wound in space itself. Roughly the size of Manhattan, it drifted past Neptune's orbit with deliberate precision. Its surface absorbed light rather than reflecting it, making detailed observation nearly impossible. But what they could see was enough to send chills through every scientist watching. Geometric patterns covered its hull, structures that bent at angles that hurt to look at, and strange protrusions that seemed to phase in and out of visible reality. Colonel James Torres, a decorated pilot with 20 years of experience, joined them in the observation deck. His dark eyes studied the feeds with military precision. "NASA wants a mission," he said flatly. "They're assembling a crew. Fast-track approval from all 5 space agencies." Patricia turned to face him, disbelief written across her features. "A mission? James, we don't even know what that thing is. It could be dangerous. It could be automated. It could be anything." "Which is exactly why we need to go," Daniel interjected. His voice carried the weight of command, earned through 3 previous space missions and countless hours navigating the void. "Humanity has been waiting for this moment since we first looked up at the stars. We can't let fear paralyze us now." 3 weeks later, the crew of the Odyssey 7 prepared for launch. The mission team consisted of 6 individuals, each chosen for their unique expertise and mental resilience. Daniel would serve as mission commander. Patricia would handle all scientific analysis and xenobiological protocols. James would pilot their craft and manage defensive systems, should they be needed. Joining them was Dr. Benjamin Wright, an engineer whose innovations in propulsion systems had made the rapid mission possible. His quiet demeanor hid a brilliant mind capable of solving problems others couldn't even comprehend. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, a linguist and mathematician, brought her expertise in pattern recognition and communication theory. Her work on artificial intelligence communication protocols made her invaluable for potential first contact scenarios. Finally, there was Lieutenant Rachel Montgomery, their communications officer and medical specialist, whose steady nerves had seen her through 2 previous crisis situations in orbit. The launch was smooth, almost eerily so. As Earth shrank behind them and the alien vessel grew larger in their forward displays, the crew maintained professional calm, though tension threaded through every conversation. Their ship, equipped with the latest fusion drive technology, would reach the object in 42 days. 42 days of watching that dark shape grow larger. 42 days of wondering what awaited them. By day 15, they detected the first transmission. It wasn't radio waves or any conventional electromagnetic signal. Instead, the alien vessel projected patterns of gravitational fluctuations, ripples in space-time itself that carried information. Yuki spent 72 hours straight decoding the message, fueled by coffee and determination. When she finally cracked it, her hands trembled as she called the crew to the command center. "It's an invitation," she announced, displaying her translation on the main screen. "But also a warning. The message contains mathematical proofs demonstrating their technological superiority. But more importantly, It includes what I can only describe as rules. Instructions for approach and entry. The rules scrolled across their displays in perfect English, somehow translated from pure mathematics into their language. Rule 1 demanded they approach from a specific vector, avoiding certain regions around the vessel. Rule 2 specified that all crew members must undergo a biological scan before entry would be permitted. Rule 3 was more ominous. Once inside, they must follow illuminated pathways exactly. Deviating would result in immediate termination of access. Rule 4 stated that certain areas were restricted, marked in red rather than the standard blue lighting. Entry into red zones was forbidden under all circumstances. Rule 5 warned them that some systems aboard the vessel would interact directly with human neurology and that they should report any unusual sensory experiences immediately. Rule 6 specified that no crew member should remain inside the vessel for longer than 8 hours at a time without returning to their ship. The final rule, Rule 7, was the most disturbing. If they encountered any biological entities aboard the vessel, they were to maintain a distance of no less than 10 meters and avoid all physical contact. Biological entities? Rachel asked, her medical training making her focus on potential contamination risks. Does that mean this thing is crude? Or are we talking about something else? The translation is imperfect, Yuki admitted. The original mathematical concepts don't map cleanly onto human language. But yes, the implication is that we might not be alone aboard that vessel. Benjamin studied the approach vector specified in the rules. This trajectory takes us past what appears to be weapons emplacements on the vessel's hull, or at least structures that could serve a defensive purpose. By following their specified path, we're essentially demonstrating compliance and non-aggression. Smart, James observed with grudging respect. If we were hostile, we'd approach differently, trying to avoid their defensive capabilities. By following their rules, we prove we come in peace. Daniel made the decision that would seal their fate. We follow every rule to the letter. No deviation, no exceptions. Everyone clear? Nods of agreement circled the command center. They were committed now, for better or worse, as they entered the final approach phase on day 40. The alien vessel filled their forward viewport completely. Up close, its true nature became apparent. The surface wasn't solid, but composed of layers upon layers of interlocking structures, like a city folded in on itself 1,000 times. Sections moved with glacial slowness, reconfiguring themselves according to some unfathomable purpose. Lights pulsed deep within those structures, not the warm glow of human technology, but cold, precise illumination that suggested vast computational power. Initiating biological scan protocol, Patricia announced as they held position at the designated coordinates. A beam of energy, invisible to human eyes but detectable on their instruments, swept across their ship. It lasted 17 seconds, penetrating their hull as if it weren't there, examining each crew member down to their molecular structure. The response came immediately. A section of the vessel's surface spiraled open like an iris, revealing a docking bay that glowed with soft blue light. The same light traced pathways deeper into the structure, beckoning them forward. Their invitation had been accepted. The docking bay swallowed their ship like a mouth, closing around prey. Daniel felt his pulse quicken as the iris sealed behind them, cutting off their view of open space and the distant sun. The blue pathways ahead pulsed gently, almost rhythmically, as if the vessel itself was breathing. Around them, the walls seemed to shimmer with a strange quality, surfaces that appeared solid one moment and translucent the next, revealing glimpses of machinery that defied conventional physics. "Atmosphere detected," Benjamin announced, his eyes scanning the environmental readouts with disbelief. "Breathable. 20% oxygen, 78% nitrogen, trace gases. It's almost identical to Earth's atmosphere at sea level. Temperature is a comfortable 22 degrees Celsius. Patricia's fingers flew across her console, analyzing the composition. That's impossible. This vessel has been in deep space for who knows how long. How is it generating and maintaining an Earth-normal atmosphere in this bay? Maybe it isn't generating it, Yuki suggested quietly. Maybe it read our biological requirements during the scan and created this environment specifically for us. The implications hung heavy in the air. If the vessel could analyze and adapt to their needs so quickly, what else was it capable of? James checked the ship's defensive systems one final time, though they all knew those systems would be useless against technology this advanced. Rachel prepared medical kits and neural monitoring equipment, her methodical movements betraying her anxiety. "Remember the rules," Daniel said as they suited up. "We stay together, follow the blue paths only, and if anything feels wrong, we return to the ship immediately. Patricia and Benjamin, you're with me on the first exploration. James, Yuki, and Rachel, you monitor from here and maintain constant communication." The airlock hissed open, and Daniel took humanity's first step onto an alien vessel. The floor beneath his boots felt solid, but seemed to respond to his weight, rippling slightly like water before stabilizing. The blue pathways stretched before them, branching at intervals into the depths of the structure. The scale was overwhelming. The bay alone was large enough to hold a dozen ships their size, and corridors led off in directions that seemed to ignore normal three-dimensional geometry. "I'm picking up electromagnetic fields," Benjamin reported, holding up a scanner. "But they're organized, purposeful, like neural pathways in a brain. This whole structure might be a kind of living computer." They followed the brightest blue path, their helmet lights cutting through the dimness beyond the bioluminescent trails. The corridor walls were covered in symbols that shifted as they watched, rearranging themselves into new patterns. Patricia recorded everything, her scientific excitement warring with primal caution. After 20 minutes of walking, they entered a vast chamber that made them all stop in their tracks. It was spherical, easily 300 meters in diameter, with platforms suspended at various heights throughout the space. But what captured their attention was the center of the chamber. Floating there, surrounded by dancing lights and energy fields, was something that looked disturbingly organic. It pulsed with a rhythm similar to a heartbeat, tendrils of light extending from it to touch various points around the sphere. "Is that a biological entity?" Daniel whispered, remembering Rule 7. They were well beyond 10 meters, but the sight still made him uneasy. "I don't think so," Patricia replied, adjusting her scanner. "The readings suggest it's technological, but the design mimics biological systems. It's like someone built a machine that thinks it's alive, or maybe something alive that learned to think like a machine." The central structure suddenly brightened, and the symbols on the walls began to move faster, swirling around the chamber in complex patterns. Then a sound filled their helmets, bypassing their communication system and seeming to form directly in their minds. It wasn't quite a voice, more like the impression of language. Mathematical concepts translated into something approaching human speech. "Welcome, travelers from the third world. You have followed the protocols. This pleases the collective." The three explorers froze. James's voice crackled urgently in their ears from the ship. "Did you hear that? Something just spoke, but it didn't come through any channel. It was directly in our heads." "We heard it too," Daniel confirmed, his throat dry. He cleared it and spoke toward the central structure, unsure if it could hear him. "We are representatives of humanity, from the planet Earth. We come in peace and seek understanding." The response came faster this time, the not voice carrying hints of something that might have been amusement. "Understanding? Such a small word for such vast concepts. You seek knowledge of our purpose, our origin, our intent. These questions have answers, but answers require context. You must see to comprehend. The blue pathways suddenly changed, some fading while new ones appeared, brighter than before. These new paths led to different corridors, ones they hadn't noticed during their initial survey. The central structure pulsed again, and images began to form in the air around it. Not holograms exactly, but something more fundamental, light arranged in patterns that told stories directly to their visual cortex. They saw a civilization, impossibly ancient, that had mastered the fabric of reality itself. Beings that looked nothing like humans, creatures of pure thought given physical form through technology and will. They had built vessels like this one, sentient ships designed to travel between galaxies, seeking other minds, other forms of consciousness to catalog and understand. But something had gone wrong. The images showed conflict, a war fought across dimensions between factions of this ancient race. One side believed in preservation and observation, the other in intervention and control. The vessel you stand within chose preservation, the Not Voice explained. It fled the conflict, traveling for spans of time your species cannot conceive. It has drifted through the void between galaxies, seeking civilizations at the moment of their awakening, when they first reach beyond their home world and touch the infinite. Patricia's voice was barely audible. You've been waiting for us? Watching Earth? Not watching, waiting. There is a difference. This vessel detected the electromagnetic noise of your civilization decades ago in your time measurement. It calculated when you would achieve the capability to visit it and position itself accordingly. You are the 73rd species it has encountered across the eons. The weight of that number settled over them. 73 civilizations spread across unimaginable time and distance, all visited by this ancient craft. Daniel found his voice again. What happened to the others? The previous 72? The pause before the answer felt ominous. Some passed the trials and received knowledge that elevated them beyond their limitations. Others failed to comprehend and departed, returning to their worlds unchanged. A few violated the restrictions and were removed from the vessel to prevent contamination. Removed, James repeated over the communication link, his military training picking up on the euphemism. That's what Rule 7 was really about. Those biological entities were supposed to avoid their specimens. Previous visitors who broke the rules. The Not Voice didn't confirm or deny, but the silence felt like acknowledgement. Rachel's voice came through, tight with barely controlled fear. You need to get out of there. This isn't first contact, it's a test, and we don't know what happens if we fail. But Daniel's curiosity, the drive that had pushed humanity to the stars, overrode his caution. You mentioned trials. What kind of trials? The central structure brightened, and suddenly the chamber transformed. The platforms shifted, reconfiguring themselves into a path that led upward to a door that definitely hadn't been there moments before. The door was marked not with blue light, but with something else, a color that seemed to exist outside normal perception, something their eyes couldn't quite process, but their minds insisted was there. Beyond that threshold lies the core archive, knowledge accumulated from 72 civilizations across 3 billion years of observation. Technologies that could solve your species' greatest challenges, answers to questions you have not yet learned to ask. But the archive is protected. To access it, you must prove your species worthy by demonstrating 3 qualities: courage, wisdom, and sacrifice. The trials will test each in turn. Benjamin's analytical mind cut through the mysticism. And if we refuse? If we leave now? Then you return to your world with the knowledge that you are not alone in the universe, but nothing more. The vessel will depart your solar system and never return. This is your species' only opportunity. The choice hung before them like the door itself, shimmering with possibility and danger. Daniel looked at Patricia and Benjamin, seeing his own conflict reflected in their faces. Through the communication link, He could hear the rest of the crew arguing. James advocating for immediate departure, Yuki suggesting they at least learn more, Rachel calculating medical risks. But Daniel already knew what they would choose. Humanity hadn't come this far by turning away from the unknown. They had crossed oceans without knowing what lay beyond, launched themselves into space with primitive rockets, and reached for the stars because reaching was what they did. This was bigger than any individual crew member, bigger than their mission, bigger than the fear that made their hands shake. "We'll take the trials," Daniel said firmly. The door shimmered open, revealing a corridor that seemed to stretch into infinity. As the three explorers stepped through, they felt reality bend around them. The passage defied logic, its walls displaying scenes from Earth's history, moments of triumph and tragedy playing out in crystalline clarity. They saw ancient humans discovering fire, empires rising and falling, the first tentative steps into space, and their own ship launching from Earth weeks ago. "It's showing us ourselves," Patricia whispered, her voice filled with wonder and unease. "Our entire journey as a species, compressed into a single pathway." The corridor opened into 3 separate chambers, each marked with a different symbol. The not voice resonated through their minds once more, softer now, almost gentle. Each trial must be faced alone. Choose your challenge according to your nature. The warrior faces courage. The scholar faces wisdom. The heart faces sacrifice. Daniel felt the weight of command settle heavier on his shoulders. He had led these people here, and now they would face unknown dangers separated from each other. "We stay in constant communication," he ordered. "Any sign of real danger, we abort immediately. Our lives are worth more than any knowledge." Benjamin stepped toward the chamber marked with angular, aggressive symbols that seemed to pulse with martial energy. "I'll take the courage trial. My engineering background might help me solve whatever physical challenge it presents." Patricia moved toward the chamber, covered in flowing script that reminded her of mathematical equations. "The wisdom trial feels appropriate for a scientist. I'll document everything." That left Daniel facing the 3rd chamber, marked with intertwined symbols that seemed to shift between representing connection and separation, unity and loss. The sacrifice trial. He took a deep breath, thinking of his family back on Earth, his daughter who had begged him not to go on this mission, his wife who had smiled through her tears and told him she understood. Understanding didn't make it hurt less. They synchronized their helmet cameras and stepped through their respective doors simultaneously. The chambers sealed behind them with a sound like a sigh. Daniel found himself in a space that made no physical sense. He stood on a platform, suspended in what appeared to be the interior of a star, plasma streams flowing in intricate patterns around him. But it wasn't hot. It was perfectly comfortable, the apocalyptic fires somehow constrained to show rather than harm. In the center of the platform stood a pedestal, and on it rested 3 objects: a vial containing glowing liquid, a data drive that pulsed with alien technology, and a simple photograph of his crew back on their ship. The not voice spoke, but this time it carried a profound sadness. Sacrifice is not about giving up what you can bear to lose. It is about choosing what matters most when all choices bring pain. The vial contains a compound that will extend human lifespan by centuries, ending age-related disease. The data drive holds the complete technical specifications for faster-than-light travel, allowing your species to reach the stars in truth. The photograph represents the immediate safety of your crew. You may choose one to take back to your world. The others will be destroyed, their possibilities erased from reality forever. Daniel's mind reeled. How could he choose? Extended lifespans would save billions, but FDL travel would open the galaxy to humanity. Yet his crew, these 5 people he had lived beside for weeks, whose lives were his responsibility, their safety hung in the balance, 2 dot in Benjamin's chamber. The engineer faced a very different challenge. The space around him was a maze of shifting platforms and lethal energy fields. At the far end, he could see an exit, but the path constantly changed. Worse, holographic projections of hostile entities patrolled the space, their weapons tracking movement. The Not voice presented his trial simply. Courage is not the absence of fear, but action despite it. Cross the maze. The projections will fire if they detect you. The pain will be real, though not fatal. Most who attempt this trial turn back after the first strike. Will you? Benjamin's hands trembled as he calculated trajectories and timing windows. He had always been more comfortable with equations than action, but he thought of his young son at home, who believed his father was a hero. Sometimes belief required validation. He stepped onto the first platform, and immediately a projection locked onto him. Energy seared across his shoulder, and he gasped as genuine pain flooded his nervous system. The trial didn't lie about that, but he pushed forward, rolling behind cover, calculating the next move while his shoulder throbbed dot in Patricia's chamber. The scientist stood before what appeared to be a living library. Crystalline structures floated in orbits around her, each containing vast amounts of data. The Not voice posed her challenge with what might have been respect. Wisdom is knowing what questions to ask and accepting that some answers change everything. Before you are the collected records of 72 civilizations. You may access any 3 entries. Choose carefully, for the knowledge you gain will shape not just your understanding, but your species' future path. Some knowledge enlightens. Some knowledge corrupts. Some knowledge destroys those who possess it. Patricia's scientific training screamed at her to choose carefully. But how could she know which knowledge was safe? She reached for the nearest crystal, and information flooded her mind. She saw a civilization that had achieved perfect harmony, eliminating conflict and suffering by merging all individual consciousness into a collective. They had peace, but they had also lost the spark of individuality that drove innovation and art. They existed in stagnant contentment, neither growing nor dying. Frozen in eternal mediocrity, she pulled back, shaken. That was the price of one form of wisdom. What horrors might the others contain? Back on the Odyssey 7, James, Yuki, and Rachel watched the vital signs of their crewmates spike and fluctuate wildly. They could hear fragments of communication, gasps of pain from Benjamin, murmurs of confusion from Patricia, and long silences from Daniel that worried them most of all. We should pull them out, Rachel insisted. Her medical training focused on the elevated heart rates and stress hormones flooding her teammates' systems. We can't, Yuki replied quietly. The door's sealed. We have no way to reach them. All we can do is trust they'll make the right choices. In his chamber, Daniel stared at the 3 objects, his mind torn in directions he hadn't known existed. The Not voice spoke again, and this time he heard something new in it, a quality that reminded him of his grandmother's voice when she had told him stories as a child, gentle but firm. You wonder if this is fair. It is not. Sacrifice never is. But fairness is a luxury of creatures who have not yet faced the true costs of advancement. Every civilization that has stood where you stand has faced this choice. Some chose technology. Some chose biology. A rare few chose differently. Daniel closed his eyes, and in the darkness behind his eyelids, he saw his daughter's face. He remembered her words at the launch site. Bring them all home safe. Daddy, that's the only thing that matters. Not extended lifespans or faster ships. Home, safe, together. He reached for the photograph dot the moment his fingers touched it. The chamber blazed with light. The Not voice returned, but now it carried something that sounded almost like approval. You chose connection over advancement. Relationship over achievement. In 3 billion years, only 7 commanders have made this choice. Most select what they believe will benefit the many, sacrificing the few. But wisdom without compassion births tyranny, and progress without love creates monuments to emptiness. The vial and data drive dissolved into particles of light. Daniel felt a moment of crushing loss, thinking of all the lives that extended lifespan could have saved. All the world's FTL travel could have opened. But then the photograph in his hands began to glow, and he understood. This wasn't about rejecting progress. It was about understanding what progress meant. In Benjamin's chamber, the engineer had crossed 3/4 of the maze, his body screaming from multiple energy strikes. But with each painful step, he found his fear diminishing, replaced by determination. He wasn't crossing this maze to prove courage to the vessel. He was proving it to himself, showing that the cautious scientist could be brave when it mattered. The final dash took him through a gauntlet of fire, and he emerged on the other side, battered but triumphant, laughing despite the pain. Patricia, after witnessing the fate of 7 civilizations through the crystals, made her choice carefully. She selected records that showed not just technologies or philosophies, but the mistakes each civilization had made and how some had learned from them. Wisdom wasn't about acquiring the most powerful knowledge. It was about understanding context, consequence, and humility. The 3 chambers opened simultaneously, reuniting the explorers in the central archive. They looked different now, changed by what they had experienced. The Not voice spoke one final time, its tone carrying a quality none of them had heard before. Warmth. You have proven what needed proving. Your species is young, barely aware of its place in the cosmos, but you possess something rare. You chose each other over power, courage over safety, understanding over raw knowledge. The archive is yours to access, but know this: the greatest gift we give you is not what you will take from this vessel, but what you learned about yourselves within it. Data began flowing into their suit computers, carefully curated information that would advance human technology without overwhelming their society. Medical treatments, energy solutions, agricultural improvements. Nothing that would let humanity destroy itself, but everything needed to reach the next level of civilization. As they returned to their ship, carrying treasure beyond measure, Daniel looked back at the massive vessel one final time. Will you visit other species? He asked the silence. The response came gently. We are always visiting, always watching for those ready to take the next step. But we are also always hoping that the next species and the next will choose as wisely as you have today. Now go home, Daniel Reeves. Your daughter is waiting, and she will be proud of the choice you made. The iris opened, releasing them back into the welcoming darkness of space.